So my understanding is that we have about 20 minutes to have a roundtable discussion, which I imagine is just comments from the floor and answers from all the speakers of this morning, and on the subject that have been illustrated, particularly on in general, how the system of civil protection should interact with scientific advice on one side, population, and give information either before or during emergencies. So I wonder if somebody would like to intervene and start the discussion. Mauro, vuoi?
Good morning. I'm Guido Giordano from University of Roma Tre. I've enjoyed the morning very much, and just wanted to make a comment taking on the provocative talk by Richard Breton, and particularly on the side that we've seen a series of different approaches that summarized in a series of diagrams from Mauro Rosi about how the Italian civil protection works and how the Japanese system works. And these diagrams show us a series of boxes with arrows that provide, flux of information that then of course we all of us probably have ideas, maybe different, but more common ideas on how these arrows should actually work in making the process as smooth as possible. Then we also know, because we are all humans, that it's exactly in those arrows that there are a series of problems. The communication doesn't really work because at each and different level, there will be supposedly it's possible that the scientific community has a common idea. It's most commonly it doesn't. Supposedly the administration will not have particular economic or political interest to trying to push in some direction, and then as a matter of fact that will happen. And then there will be the public will receive instruction and behave, and then most commonly that would also not happen. So my comment is that of course those of us who are scientists are focused on trying to improve our understanding of the processes and provide the better advice. But then the problem is that the advice works or doesn't work in specifically on those arrows. So I think that we should probably, as a community, make an assessment of the probability of success of, for example, an evacuation plan. Each country will have different problems, so that won't be common, but each culture has got different issues. But I think that after having devised the plan, we should also think, will it work? And starting from the end, which is where we want to, reach. We want the public to be safe. How does it will it work? And going backward toward us, see where we can actually improve. And I think we scientists, irrespectively of our wishes, we would be involved at each and any level because informed decision making need not only providing an information, decision making needs the full, I think that's my personal opinion anyway, the full involvement. So we should be, prepared to advise prior to, during, and after the crisis. And we should be prepared, and that's why I'm talking about assessment of probability of success of a plan, to think where we can work ahead, or anyway to be prepared at the time of the crisis to deal with, some research group that comes in and says, no, that's so, everything that's been said by the officials is wrong. Or, having a public that, environmental issues or something like this. So that's all.
Should I be the first to comment on that? You refer to arrows, and I think the traditional approach to arrows is that you have an arrow going in one direction, and I think that may be an arrow in the first model that I portrayed. I suspect that if we looked at the new model, it would be a two-way arrow of communication down and up. I think as a lawyer, the starting point would be to look at what the legal regime is, and that the legal regime framework for safety should give you some idea as to what the legal requirement is as to these arrows. I suspect that old law will be very much a one-way arrow, and it may therefore be that the laws are rather out of date, and that when you introduce two-way arrows, which is perhaps another word for collaboration, that may not be what the law requires. And if you do something differently to what the law requires, you're vulnerable. I think that's the first point. The second point is this, that I think that a system is vulnerable legally if it hasn't been tested. And therefore I think that it behooves risk managers not only to devise a good plan, but in times of peace, before unrest, to see whether it works. Most certainly as a lawyer, it would be far too easy for me to say, well, why did you think that it was such a good plan before unrest if you didn't test it? Obviously subject to the resources and time being available, but it's such an easy legal point to make was, well, why wait until the time when everyone was on pressure, you running out of time, to find out whether the ship sinks or not? It was far better for everyone, scientists, risk managers, to be involved at that earlier stage, so that you could say, well, we've tested it and we're pretty confident that in times of crisis it will work. I think that makes it legally more defensible. I fear that's a rather inadequate response to a very good question.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, one comment I want to make on this problem of the arrows and the communication, and somehow relates also to the legal aspects, is that, for instance, the way the commission led by Professor Maiani is working is through precise procedures. I mean, there are procedures that must be followed in giving advices to the civil protection. And in a sense, when I was mentioning the fact that the civil protection is pointing out questions to the commission, is another way of making clear which is your responsibility and which is my responsibility, okay? So by the time I make a precise question, I raise a precise question to the commission responds, answer on that. And at that moment, we are clearly separating the responsibilities of what is happening. So So it is clear that we are living in a time in which we have to make all these mechanisms to work in a more efficient way and in a clearer way and in a transparent way.
Yeah. Just to comment very briefly on this, to continue along this line, on the point of protocols and procedures. I think that is something that scientists have not considered very much for a long while. In fact, there are not many protocols and procedures in place at volcano observatories worldwide. Sometimes there is something, but, well, something similar to protocols, but still there is a clear need for much more along that direction. And that's something that helps a lot in ensuring that you're doing what you're expected to do, or at least what you could define is the best way to do things. Someone comments that protocols and procedures should include a degree of flexibility also, in order not to impede you to be quick and efficient in reacting. And that's probably where it is a bit more difficult to define effective protocols, because they have to give, I would say, rules or maybe checklists, and at the same time not give you too many restrictions. And another point that was mentioned by you, Guido, is the effectiveness of the flow of information, which is also another critical point. In fact, we had a meeting on this last week, and it's definitely true that ensuring an effective flux of information is not necessarily easy. I think one of the aspects is that those who are involved, we should keep it simple. Simple means that there should be clear responsibility. You should know who is allowed to speak for whom. And those, well, you know, when there is an emergency, a crisis, a volcano erupting somewhere in all volcanoes in the world, there are many people who get an interest in that, an obvious interest, because that's where we learn. So many people want to go there and learn and also help. And by one hand, that's very nice because there is an international response. On the other hand, that may create a total mess in the flux of communication, because if there is no protocol in place, no one will understand who is saying what and for whom. And media will get confused, will get the same relevance to the visitor from outside or from the nearby university, and the person in charge of managing the communication, and so on and so forth. So both protocols and simple channels of communication, which should be established before, I think. It's something we should mind at.
If I could perhaps chip in another dimension that you mentioned, and that's what I would call friendly fire. So, and you've got an emerging crisis, and all sorts of research groups want to voice their opinion. And I think there's some good examples across the world where this, let's say, emerging volcanic crisis is actually amplified by a scientific crisis. So this is something that, of course, needs to be dealt with. Perhaps best during peacetime, where the rules of engagement and the different roles of all these stakeholders are defined in the first place. The other story is then, of course, in recent years, the banking crisis, the nuclear crisis, we see that those industries, if you want, they undergo stress tests. Very well audited stress tests, and one of the possibilities I see as an outcome of a workshop like this is, of course, to run perhaps far more simulations. You know, you don't have to go through a full simulation where you evacuate thousands of people where things get really financially quite expensive. But I don't see a reason why you cannot run more stress tests just to test a few elements of a line of command, of these arrows and how they really flow. Of course, you always under scrutiny. You always be asked, how close to the reality is that? But I would counter that whenever you are in a crisis, thinking about these things is perhaps too late and maybe a recipe for disaster.
Maybe I will make a comment on that. I think many interesting things have are coming out of this discussion. Perhaps these remarks about peacetime are really very important. And after all, this workshop should be one of the purposes to confront our situation with what we learn from our guests, particularly from Japan. Has been very detailed discussion. If I can make a comment of somebody who came just 2 years ago completely from the outside and getting into a new territory, my impression is that as for science, we are more or less on a very similar plan. Science, monitoring, etc., more or less. There is a status of the art which is there. But what is really lacking in our country is precisely the two-sided arrows between civil protection, regional and local governments and population. And in time of peace, we should really test that. And I'm referring to Campi Flegrei and to Vesuvio, just to make some name. I think that it is not good to expect to wait until there is some activity going on to involve the population, etc. It is the time where the activity is not there that one should make periodic drills, periodic confrontations, and as was said, make the test of the emergency plan when everything is quiet and to see whether it is going to work. Because it is clear that under the stress, under the fire, there will be newspapers shooting, opposition crying, etc. And if you are not sure that things are working, this is going to be a disaster. And I think this is the thing that most strikes me, the silence which is about these things when there are no alarms, and the noise which is made when some alarm is coming. I think we should reflect on that, because from Japan we saw a large organization and a general report about major disasters, etc., which come out when there is, in that moment, there is nothing. So I think we should reflect on that and perhaps learn something from this discussion. Other
There are a lot of important questions that have been raised during this discussion. I will try to contribute to this discussion. A general question is relating to what Mauro Rosi just said. I think that his vision is too simple. I'm also obviously taking care of the L'Aquila story and the direct experience. But if Civil Protection Department raise a question, a specific question, to his advising commission, Agris Commission, this don't solve any question. because first, the raised question not necessarily is a correct one. And a scientist group has not to give an answer to an incorrect question, but has right to give information and say and explain why the question is not correct, and try to give the most correct answer. But in any case, seen from a third part, for instance, a judge, the expert commission is not justified by not having its own on its proper autonomy, take care of the problem. I don't know really how the question can be addressed and which is the organization and the responsibility sharing that should be adopted, but certainly the system is very, very complex, as it cannot be based simply on a question and answer between two independent bodies. But moving from this responsibility question to a more general hazard or risk evaluation, well, it seems to me that if we go to the two major volcanic risk area of Italy, that has been also briefly mentioned, Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei. A few years ago, I participated to a study that intended to assess the level of risk perception in the local people. Well, let me simply say that the results are really frustrating, particularly in Campi Flegrei. Say the majority of people living in Campi Flegrei don't even know that is a volcanic area. If you ask them which is the nearest volcano, they say Vesuvius. And really the level of preparation is incredibly low. This level of preparation does not increase if you move from ordinary people living there to their administrator, that, by the way, taking consideration the political system, they change every few years. And also if you start an education campaign, then you will have within few years another person to deal with. They don't know anything. The measure of Pozzuoli don't know much than its common citoyen. It will give the same answer. So, looking at the scheme presented by our Japanese colleague, I was really impressed in seeing municipality and all arrows from any direction going toward municipality. Say, in Italy, this really cannot be possible. Municipality is a structure without any preparation at all. On the paper, on the basis of the law, it has the major responsibility for civil protection, but no competence, no preparation at all. So, and I don't want to take too much time. I think that there are a lot of questions that has to be addressed. Some of these are scientific questions. It would be interested in discussing all the scientific capability of volcanic prediction today and what could be do in the future to improve this capability. But the real problem, to my opinion, is that there is in any case a scientific body that try to do something, try to improve knowledgement, try to improve preparedness, and there is the overall rest which has direct responsibility and should deal with the crisis management, which is really very far from being aware of the problem and from having the minimum preparation needed. Then we could discuss, and I'm obviously personally interested in this discussion, that part that has a direct full legal responsibility is never involved in the responding of the lack of their action capability.
Can I just the problem is in the normals, but I just wanted to comment on communications, in the sense that what we have seen by meeting several observatories during last days is that those observatories in the so-called developing countries are far beyond many other countries in the way they keep a continuous, effective, fruitful interaction and communication and education with the population there. And I got the message that the population living close to volcanoes in developing countries, it's probably they know much more of the volcanoes and the volcanic hazards that those population living close to volcanic countries in so-called developed countries. And there is clearly something that we have missed, that we have forgotten while developing all our science and technology, which is these two-way arrows.
Can I perhaps add to this? Because this was also clear during the VUELCO workshop that the issue of, let's say, the political timescale compared to the geological or volcanological timescale and the loss of memory in the municipality, if you want, or the mayor's offices. What some countries obviously have resorted to is actually where the volcanologists or the scientists are seeking much more active contact with the population, bypassing the political structures because of the discontinuity, if you want, of awareness of volcanic hazards. So these are approaches that are followed by some countries. I'm not saying that's a solution, but it's something that's been obviously exploited somewhere else.
Okay, I think we may.
I think another useful issue that has been identified is one of the purposes of a simulation exercise or a trial or a test is to identify the competencies which are required. And I think those can be on a number of different levels. Well, what is the competency which is required at a national level, regional and local level? And it is against those competencies that you would test the people in position at that time. And we know that in any system which has elected representatives, they can perhaps, there's a high churn, and therefore the people in position at this particular moment don't have the necessary competencies, and an exercise will reveal them. And then, of course, there are the competencies which are required at an individual level as well. And the traditional model is that you work out what the competencies are in order to make the system work. You identify the competencies of the entities or the people in position at the time. And if there's a mismatch between them, you have to have some form of additional knowledge, production, or training. And it may be that when you have a population who have never seen one of these things in their lifetime or in the lifetime of their forebears, there will be perhaps a complete mismatch between what they need to know and what they do know. And it's only by stress testing the model in times of peace that you will work out what further work needs to be done before the unrest starts.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can...
Yeah, one of the things I want to mention is that this department has organized also courses for technicians working in the municipalities. So the department have started this activity because it is clear that the political positions, the mayor and the assessors, they are rotating. So, but it is important in order to have some kind of competence, stable competence in the civil protection matter. It is important to have functionaries of the municipalities that get learned in this field.
Okay. Are other comments or questions? Well, we can.
I want just to have a short comment on the on the matter on the scientific community, because was mentioned a lot during the presentation, and in some part of the discussion was even not very well presented, because the scientific community actually is the one of the end of the problem and is a necessary part of the system that should work. And in this direction, I just want to add, ask to the civil protection to make more effort in establishing which are not only the competence but also the answer that wants from the scientific community, because sometimes we have a very well structured monitoring system in Italy, but different actors are working in this system, and sometimes it happens that the answer are opposite or not, at least not in accordance. So I think that the civil protection or the high risk commission should have this role of establishing also the type of information that wants from the civil protection, including threshold, including information on the level of risk that sometimes have created in the past conflicts and problems to the whole community. Italians are very good in not having rules, and if they have rules, they're very good in not respecting the rules. But this is I think very important in these fields, and not only from the scientific community, but also in order to improve also the communication, the education level of the population. I was surprised to see in the movie that the Japanese colleague showed to us that even the population in Japan were running in the direction of the plumes instead of taking care of the risk. So this means that we have to do a lot with the sociologists, even the psychologists, if it's the case, to improve the communication between scientific community and through the civil protection also towards the civil community. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can stop at this point, and we reconvene at 15:00, 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.